And we are live. Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen. I am one of your co-hosts, Blake Ruffino. Alongside me is my counterpart and co-host, Joe DeLeone. Good evening, good sir. How are you?
Blake, what did we say last week? We said that every time that there is a week that we expect it to be boring and there's not a lot of big matchups on paper, what always happens? Crazy crap ends up happening when we least expect it. I am hoping that none of our listeners were dragged away to go out do apple picking or go to the pumpkin patch or whatever on Saturday, because you missed a lot. You missed a lot. We got a lot to get to today.
Well, I did. I will admit, during a bye week of the team that I cover full time, other than the sport nationally, we went and got family portraits made at 8 a.m., but we were back before 11, before the ball kicked off. So
priorities.
Yeah, priorities were met. I got to give a shout out to my wife, Megan. Priorities were always met when it comes to, but the photos came out great. We got it. We had to get family photos. I don't get many Saturdays that I can just chill and watch games, but I was able to do it. But what a Saturday to be able to sit there and just watch games all day. Joe, outright carnage happened. Vanderbilt upsets Alabama, which is quite honestly rattling the sport as we know it.
And that's obviously not the only other upset. We have 4 top 10 teams that go down. USC losing was so bad that they got bounced out of the AP poll and they're not ranked currently. Blake, I know that we've got a lot to get to today, but one of the things that we were talking about pre-show, and I've tweeted a lot about this. One, I don't think that there's a clear answer on who the best team in the country is. This is 2007 all over again. It is starting to give those vibes with the amount of crazy, just unexpected outcomes, the weird resumes that we're going to have for these playoff teams. I feel like with the way that college football is at the current moment, with the transfer portal, NIL, all of this, it's a lot harder for a lot of these good teams to have good depth. So then it enables some of these back-end conference teams to have an easier time pulling off upsets. I'm not saying that the separation gap has been closed so much so that Vanderbilt can consistently compete with Alabama year in and year out, but I wouldn't be surprised if we don't see more upsets like this the rest of the year for a number of those reasons.
Yeah, I mean, look, we're obviously going to talk about Vanderbilt and Bama. They didn't know how to react to the success. This team did not know how to react to the success. So we'll talk about that. I thought they showed their rear ends. You know, Malachi Moore there should be some punishment behind what Malachi Moore did at the end of the game. I'm sure we'll get into that. But Joe, I got to be real with you. I don't know how much it is portal versus like a team like Tennessee that we hyped up so much. Joe, what did I tell you last week that a lot of Tennessee fans got on to me about? You know, I had the hot take last week with you that Arkansas was the best team that Tennessee had faced. And they are the best team that Tennessee had faced. I don't care what you tell me about Oklahoma, because here's what I know about Arkansas. They actually have a pulse on offense. Like if they didn't turn the football over, which by the way, they didn't, that was the point that I made with Arkansas last week was, Joe, they're 3 turnovers away from being undefeated. And I think that was the point where we saw with Tennessee. But I got to be real with you. Nico Imalava, for what it's worth, is struggling in these bigger matchups against Oklahoma and against Arkansas, which we also have to bring up.
Yeah, we're going to break down Nico's performance when we talk about that game, and I've got some thoughts on that. But I don't want to say there's been a regression. It just feels like when there was
from something that you hadn't seen.
Right. I think that we are being quickly reminded, and I'm bringing up the regression aspect of this for a reason that I think that there's going to be a lot of fans that are on opposite ends of the spectrum that are now looking at this as an opportunity to clown on him and to clown on Tennessee and all that. We need to remind ourselves that when you have a redshirt freshman starting at quarterback, there are a lot of highs and lows. There is not steady consistency.
No,
we were excited by the progression and the improvement on a week-to-week basis and the way that he was able to step up and make big plays, but he came back down to earth on the road against a team that had, you hit the nail on the head, nothing to lose. This Arkansas team is probably one of the most dangerous teams in the conference because Sam Pittman and Bobby Petrino do not have a damn thing to lose. So they're just going to do whatever it takes.
Well, Joe, I told you last week, and before we move on here, a lot of people from Louisiana on that staff. Okay. And like I told you, they were unloading the clip was the phrase that they used this past weekend. They unloaded it. So, I mean, listen, I picked Tennessee to win. So what am I even bragging about? But it comes to a place where when you go on the road with a young quarterback in this conference, it's a big deal. But by the way, our game picks this year, somebody has retaken the lead, and it was because of Texas A&M at home beating the dog manure out of Mizzou.
I didn't realize that you retook the lead. Yeah, I absolutely regret taking Missouri, and if there's one team after this weekend, I think that most of the teams that we're going to talk about in depth today, not Michigan and USC, but most of the teams, especially the SEC teams that we're talking about in depth, their season's still alive. That is going to be part of the theme for today's conversation. Missouri, that's not the case. I couldn't be more out on Missouri because of the way that they lost, the way that they played, and the weaknesses that they had. The way in which they were exposed is extremely troubling. So I'm out on Missouri until they prove that their O-line problems, a lot of things can get better in the coming weeks.
Their O-line's really, really bad.
Yeah.
Miami, another week with a heart. I mean, just like Joe. By the way, full disclosure, it was 2 o'clock a.m. local time where I was when this game was being played, and it was 35-10. I got to be honest. I went to sleep like, oh, my God, Cal just pulled off an upset. I wake up. Miami had come all the way back to beat Cal in another thriller. Miami remains undefeated.
The conversation that we're going to have about Miami is going to be really weird, and I'm very curious your thoughts on it, which we will save. But I do have to admit this.
They're going to get beat by somebody. They're going to get beat by somebody.
Yeah, we'll get to that. I didn't finish watching this game either. Yeah, I had to wake up. I work on Sundays for my job with Yahoo. I had to wake up very, very early. My shift started at 7:30 this morning, so I had to wake up early. I went to bed at like 2, trying to watch the end of this damn game. And I woke up, and it felt like a fever dream watching SportsCenter replaying the highlights saying that Miami won. I'm like, there's no way.
I had to go back and rewatch the entire game. That's what I did today. I went back and go back and rewatch the entire game, which we did. We'll talk about that.
Yeah.
So, to wrap this up, we got so many topics. I don't want to get to all of them, but we got so much we got to get to. USC and Michigan both fall. Here's the stat for you. You ready? Lincoln Riley is 5-7 in his last 12 football games.
Well, another stat to add to that, Clay Helton, his record to start his career at USC is continuing to get better than Lincoln's. And I think it is. I hate that I allowed myself to get sucked back in after 1 week. My thoughts on Lincoln Riley still stand. I think that they and Michigan were proven fraudulent with the way that they played.
Michigan doesn't have a quarterback.
No.
Michigan just doesn't have a quarterback. By the way, I'm going to need you tonight to put some respect on Will Rogers' name because na boo boo, I told you so.
Why did I know that you were going to do this? Why did I know that you were going to do this? He's been fine. He's been strong. He's been a good player. My problem is that you painted him to be some great player in the conference.
I said he was a really good college football quarterback. And guess what he is? By the way, Washington's 4-1, 5-1.
You praised him. I don't remember the exact word that you used, but you were much higher praise than just saying he's a really good college quarterback. I said he was fine.
I defended Will Rogers was because Zach Arnett ran a program right into the ground, and Will Rogers got blamed for it. Everybody blamed him. Look how bad Mississippi State is at the current moment.
I didn't blame him for Mississippi State's situation. But I mean, like the interception that he threw plays into the argument that you and I got into the offseason. Like he's fine. He makes some good throws. He can keep an offense on schedule. They've got a really good run game, so everything's not on his shoulders. But he makes plenty of mistakes. He does.
The interception he threw was really bad. But look, they're a one-loss team. Here come the Huskies. We'll talk about all that too. So let's waste no time, Joe, and getting into it. Everybody do us a favor by hitting the like and share. If you're on Facebook, share to all those groups, all to those social media pages. You're watching us, listening to us on YouTube. Like, subscribe, notification bell, wherever you listen to podcasts. Rate, review, and subscribe. Joe, we're going to come back and talk about Alabama getting shocked and upset by Vanderbilt. How about the goalpost going downtown Nashville in the middle of a big – name another big city like that could happen.
I'm surprised that those guys The police didn't step in, but yeah, you're absolutely
you
right.
didn't see? You didn't see what happened?
Well, they fished it out of the river.
They kicked down the barricades that the police put up, and they kicked through the police. They didn't. Nashville police. I mean, there's nothing they could do.
I did not know that.
Here come the Commodores. We talk about that next. Stay with us. BetOnline is the fastest and easiest way for you to wager on all of your favorite sports, contests, events, with the first-to-market odds and lines. Find reviews for all the news for each league, including Major League Baseball, NFL, NBA, NHL, combat sports, college sports, esports, and even golf. BetOnline continues to be the top online resource for all of your sports information for live in-game betting, props, and futures. Head on over to BetOnline today and use your mobile device to join and make your first sports bet. Use our promo code BELIEVE50, that's BELIEVE50, BLEAV 50, to receive your 50% off welcome bonus on your first deposit. That's betonline.ag, betonline.ag. We're back. All right, Joe, let's get into it here. No time to waste. So much to discuss. Alabama, number one team in the country, goes on the road to Nashville. And, Joe, what might be the biggest upset in the last maybe decade, and I mean that when I say it, maybe the biggest upset in quite some time, Vanderbilt knocks off number one Alabama. Your thoughts on the game?
Yeah, I know that a lot of people sometimes don't love it when you come on these shows and it's let's point the finger, but the finger does have to be pointed in this situation. Goes on the hands of Kalen DeBoer and Kane Womack, the defensive coordinator. They, as much as we heard about the rat traps, we heard all about that coming into the week. They were not mentally prepared for this game. They took Vanderbilt way too lightly. They could not have been more blatantly apparent. And it translated to such a clear impact in the way that they played defense. Diego Pavia, very elusive, very hard to tackle. He is also, they were using him in a lot of speed option plays, a lot of read option plays. They were utilizing him as a very impactful runner in their offense. And they were not playing good contain. They were not tackling. They were not rallying to the football. The complete opposite of the way that we saw them play against Georgia, the way that we know that they can play. Despite all this, though, and I think this is where we're probably going to start arguing, I'm not out on Alabama yet.
No, I'm not.
Okay. I think that anybody who is quick to completely crap all over Kalen DeBoer and say that he's doomed is overly reactionary. I think it is way too soon to make that judgment for a guy in his first year at his current job. It is the simple instance of him looking past an opponent, not playing up to the standard, and them getting their asses beat. There is so much room for improvement. I know that sounds like I'm being overly positive, Blake, but
little bit.
Bailing now is way too soon.
Well, I will say this. The Malachi Moore thing would frustrate me if I'm a Bama fan.
Yes.
And everybody knows what's probably happened, how he reacted at the end of the game. I'm not going to go down that rabbit hole. I know a lot of people already have. It's uncalled for. He shouldn't have done it. Basically told his coaches to go F themselves at the end of the game. Well, maybe, that there's a time and place for it. But, Joe, I'm gonna say this. I'm gonna kind of get on Kalen DeBoer. Like we looking at the players and the aspect of what they did. Kalen DeBoer called a really bad football game as a head coach. Now, offensively, I thought they were fine. They did okay. They weren't great, but they did okay. Vanderbilt had the football for 42 minutes and 8 seconds in time of possession. They were 12 of 18 on third downs, Joe. So when I look at this game, what happened? Kalen DeBoer did not try to get his defense off the field. And that's what happens when most head coaches who are offensive-minded think about one side of the football instead of being a CEO of an entire program. Look, I thought that there were multiple times that Alabama could have won this football game, multiple third down situations where they would do a zone read, guy in the flat, Pavia would give it, pull it, run it, throw it in the flat, and it kept beating them. They were undisciplined. That falls on the coaching staff. That falls on the players. But the simple nature that they weren't trying to at least establish the running game and give their defense a break, who ran 75 plays last night, Joe, is kind of on DeBoer. Now, you can blame the kids. You can blame everybody else. And you're right. People want to point the finger.
Yeah.
But the simple nature of this game is I don't want to look past the oh, well, Alabama was just looking past Vandy. That's fine. That's an easy way to look at it. No, Clark Lee and Vandy came in there and whipped their ass.
Okay.
They got their asses whipped on the line of scrimmage. They were undisciplined in their front seven. Their DBs, who we thought were really good last week, got pushed around by Eli Stowers, okay? Like, absolutely pushed around. Joe, multiple times, they were just running plays, and he was body bagging DBs. They wanted it more. And the what we had grown to know under Saban is that this team never gets bullied. Well, the simple nature is, and the simple fact is, Bama got bullied by Vandy. Now, you can be concerned about it. I'm not out on them either. But they got out-coached, they got out-schemed, they got outplayed, and they got out-efforted. And that was why Vandy kept doing it. Now, Joe, here's the big thing for me. Womack is a guy who's still a young DC. But the simple nature that Vandy was 12 of 18 on third down. Joe, they ran the ball 40 times between Pavia and Alexander. It's not like they were busting big runs. They were legitimately 3 yards in a cloud of dust, 3 yards, first down, 3 yards, first down, 3 yards, first down. That was their game plan. And Diago Pavia, who is just an outright vibe right now, put this team on his back for them to win it.
So quickly to the point that you made about Vanderbilt, yes, they absolutely deserve a ton of credit. And I think that's always going to be something that we quickly, just naturally in the media, we quickly skip over to talk about the bigger program. Clark Lee got his guys ready, and Diago Pavia has been one of the just truest underdog stories that has outworked every single hurdle that's been placed in front of him being a recruit coming out of the state of New Mexico. And for him to land here to get one of the biggest upsets in the history of the sport, in the history of the SEC, it's extremely commendable. You're very right by saying this, that Clark Lee, his team, they wanted it more. They were far more motivated. They were extremely passionate, and they were going to lay everything out there on the field. To move forward with what you brought up with Womack, that's what's really crazy here, is that they didn't do anything that was super unique or hard to stop or anything that was confusing. Their longest rush the entire game was 13 yards. Mm-hmm. Alabama, if we're just talking about
by the way, Joe, the second longest run came on at the last play of the game where they ran for 12 yards. Right.
Yes. Everything that they did was nothing that was so complex to figure out. They ran a lot of speed option, a lot. Pavia was really hard for them to track down, and I know he only ran for 56 yards on 20 carries. That doesn't look like a great number, but he was able to create so much for his teammates. Why they weren't playing, one, better contain, and then two, trying to pressure him more.
Because they were undisciplined, and they didn't know how to stop.
Right. So they were undisciplined, but it also felt like, why did it feel like Womack was on his heels the whole game, man? Why was there no desire to attack? Why was there no desire hey, we're going to start sending pressure?
Well, let me defend him. Can I defend him? I put that more on Kalen DeBoer. Can I tell you why? You legitimately knew in the first half that you had got absolutely abused in time of possession. By the third quarter, you had to have known.
Okay.
I mean, Joe, again, 42 minutes of time of possession. I'm not trying to take anything away. That defense gave up 40 points. But, Joe, think about this. Look at the other side of the football and the running attack by Jam Miller and Justice Haynes. You had legitimate success running the football yourself, and you didn't start playing any kind of keep away. Joe, you're coming all the way back. You're down 30-28, and you're throwing the football when you're running it at 8 yards a carry. I know that Jalen Milroe is who he is. I know he played I say a good game, not a great game. But Joe,
the turnovers weren't his fault, by the way, for anyone who wants to jump in.
No, the fumble's his fault. The
fumble's his fault. Fumble's his fault, but his right tackle completely whiffed on a block, so it's a mix between the two of them. The interception's a bad bounce.
Yeah. Turnovers, it is what it is. But the bottom line is you're still running the football at will. Joe, they had 75 plays at Vanderbilt and had 42. Joe, if I would have told you on Thursday that Vandy would have the ball for 40-plus minutes in the game, what would you have said?
I would have said that they outran them.
Well, you probably would have said that Alabama's scoring at will and they're very explosive and that Ryan Williams is going off, and that didn't happen. By the way, Ryan Williams got 2 touches in the second half. Both of them went for touchdowns, by the way. So not only not getting your best playmaker the ball in space, but you are running the ball down their throat and you're not doing anything about it. I think that there comes a part where I understand what you're saying about Womack. But there's got to come a time for when you're Kalen DeBoer and your defense is completely gassed that you take your foot off the gas a little. In this sense, you're already running the football for 8 yards a carry. Give them a breather.
This was an issue that, if we recall last year with Kalen DeBoer, there were times where they abandoned the run game so much so that it felt like if you just were checking the box scores for Washington. If you were just checking the box scores for Washington, you would have thought that they had a trouble running the ball. Like that they couldn't figure out how to run the football. That whatever, you might have guessed that was an issue for them. But towards the end of the season, when they leaned on their run game, that was when Washington was at their best. This is just a general concept that frustrates the shit out of me. And the people that are in the analytics community that love to yell about, well, running the football is not very efficient. You're just better off throwing it, blah, blah, blah. Those people don't know shit about the sport of football that make that argument, because this is the perfect example. When you start abandoning running the football and you're overly committed to passing and you're not leaning on what can work when you know that it can, you are going to sell your team out. You're going to sell your offense out. That decision-making that you're talking about is so very true. And it applies for what we're going to talk about with Missouri later. It applied for what we talked about with Ole Miss later. Balanced offensive attacks are the key to success. You need to lean on your run game when it's working. It is the way that teams win football games. Teams that can run the ball, especially in college football, win freaking football games. I completely agree with you. The fact that, like, I'm looking at a box score here, Jam Miller and Justice Haynes, 5 carries, 6 carries is it's insane. That was the amount of carries
for Jam Miller, who's at 9 yards a carry, right, and 2 touchdowns. I mean, there comes a part where you got to take. You can't take your foot off the gas, and then when the game got late, you didn't have a choice because you were down. Like, I look when Vandy was up 33-28, Joe, as an example, and the turnover just occurred. There was a 3rd and 1 in the red zone. They ran a triple option RPO where they did a zone read, and Pavia could either give it, run it, or throw it in the flat. Well, he pulls it and throws it in the flat, and it's a touchdown. And I know you could tell that Womack, who is talking to all 3 of the safeties that are on the field at the current moment, he is literally telling them what's coming. And they still don't, like, execute what they need to execute. There was always going to be, at some point in this season for Bama, because the big man, Saban, left, that they were going to have a game like this. I just don't think that anybody figured that it would be Vandy that happened. Joe, I got to be real with you. If it's not a traditional triple option team, but they didn't do anything special. There was nothing special from a dynamic X's and O's standpoint that they did. They knew that you had better athletes than you, or that you had better athletes than them, and they out-schemed you. But I gotta say this, Joe. I gotta say it. That D-line got pushed around. And I understand that there wasn't necessarily instances where there were long runs and the longest was 13. When crunch time happened, when crunch time was here, what happened? Vandy ran the ball at will. And I think that in and of itself, when you look at it, you're like, by the way, Pavia would have had over 80 yards rushing if the sack yardage wasn't included into it. So I'm like, you got to take all of that into account.
Yeah.
But they couldn't stop Diego Pavia, who, Joe, I'm just going to say it. I don't know how else to say it. He keeps them a contender in every game that they'll play for the rest of the season. They have Kentucky this weekend.
Well, when you say contender, you're just saying that he keeps them alive, not like
bad word.
Yeah.
He gives them the ability to win in any game that they play from here on out, because that dude is just a playmaker.
They are, and it's what we said in the preview. He is a headache. He is the type of quarterback that is extremely elusive, is experienced, puts everything on the field, leaves it all out there, is not afraid to take chances or take risks. He is a headache for everybody that they play. And I know that there's probably not an expectation that Vanderbilt finishes the year 9-3. It's probably not going to happen. But could they end up being bowl eligible, being 6-6, and knocking off another team in an unexpected upset and beating up on the rest of the back end of the SEC? It's totally capable for them to have happen. I'm a fan of Pavia, though. He's an electric player. He is very fun to watch. He creates for that team. I hope that next year that they're able to find a kid like that again, because it stinks that his time in college is going to be done after the season.
Any other thoughts about this game?
No, what I brought up in the beginning, I think still stands true. One, Alabama's playoff hopes are not done. They're not dead. They now can't drop any of their other big games remaining on their schedule, but they're not gone.
They can lose another game and make a playoff.
Yeah, they can go 10-2 and still get in, but that's the at most, and they've got a couple of difficult matchups. It's probably going to hurt them that Missouri's not going to look as good of a win when they play them, but there's still a shot. The playoff is still alive and well. The SEC championship is still alive and well.
Yeah, I mean, look, a team that has a pulse, okay? Well, let me say this. Let me back up and scratch what I just said. Okay. Here's what I'm also going to say that I think did happen. I think Kirby figured out the board in the second half and teams started implementing it. Outside of Ryan Williams catching that long bomb that saved them, I think, look, there were a lot of things defensively that Vandy did to slow them down. Lots of things. Joe, they didn't really, outside of Ryan Williams, they weren't doing anything. They were going man-to-man on everybody else, brother. I mean, they were doing run-free high that shaded to Ryan Williams. That's why he wasn't as effective. Now, you got to still find ways to get him the football like you did on the reverse and the touchdown. But I'm just going to say this. I'm really interested that after that Georgia game, you see Clark Lee, who's a defensive-minded guy. You know this better than most. Boy, they ran a lot of the same stuff that Georgia did in that second half, did they not? So I'm just going to see. They're going to have to figure out how to beat what they're seeing schematically right now for them to keep going. So, yeah, so they do. Mm-hmm. You know, but you're right. The season's not over for Bama. All right. Let's go to Arkansas and Tennessee. Joe, I'm not going to come in here and say I told you so, because I still pick Tennessee to win. But last week, you and I discussed Arkansas versus Tennessee and that this game was going to be a slugfest, and boy, was it. Arkansas shocks the world. Woo Pig Suey pulls up the upset and beats, well, maybe not shocks Blake Ruffino, because we had a conversation about it. But
yeah.
Woo Pig Suey and Sam Pittman get the job done and knock off number 4 Tennessee.
I do appreciate the hilariousness, the funniness of the argument that you and I sparked turned you into a martyr for Arkansas fans. They were all rushing to your side because I was saying that they didn't have a chance. And
I'm an Arkansas homer. If you didn't see the chat or the comments on our show, by the way.
Totally. Taylor Green had his best game. Man, that was easily the biggest tipping point in this game, is that he was the most efficient that he's ever been. He was the most cerebral as a runner. He was connecting with his guys in the passing game in tough situations. When we're talking about him being better than he was before, we're talking about him being better from 40% all the way up to, I think he was in the high 60s or 70s for his completion percentage. Ridiculously good game. And if he didn't go down with the injury that he had late on in the fourth quarter-ish, they might have won this more handedly. Like, they might have had an easier time winning this football game. Got to give him credit. Got to give Petrino credit. They played a fantastic game. We're going to talk about Pittman in that situation in a bit. Dude, the play calling by Heupel in this game and the clock management was horrendous. That's my biggest thing. I chalk that up to just bad late game decision-making by Heupel that completely cooked them. And then the final thing, Blake, that was really problematic for Tennessee, the interior of their offensive line played terribly. They played very poorly. There were a number, and especially early on, it completely took any early momentum out of Tennessee's offense. There were so many quick, immediate pressures up the middle on Nico where he could not read what was happening in front of him. They played very poorly. That was a brutal performance by that offensive line.
I want to start off by agreeing with you and saying that Taylor Green, let's just call it Taylor Green outplayed Nico.
Yes.
Without question. Yeah. And he sat in the pocket. He made some very clutch throws. and man-on-man coverage. Most of them, the Armstrong, the big freak on the outside, the 6'4" wide receiver. Joe, can I tell you why during this past week I was saying that this one's going to be a dogfight? Because I love the analogy that we talk about so much on this show. I don't like when a pit bull is in a corner with nothing to lose. Never have, never will. And I just talking to some people, and I told you this last week too, there were people that were on that staff that told me we're, quote unquote, unloading the clip. And I was just like, look, man, this could go one of two ways. Either they're going to fall flat on their face or they're going to win this football game. Okay. I thought that they would fall on their face. It just kind of felt like Tennessee might be too much. But as we also discussed, this was the best team that Tennessee had played all year. Joe, it wasn't NC State who's flawed. It's not Oklahoma that's flawed. It wasn't Kent State, who's ranked 133rd in 11 of the 12 major statistical categories. It was none of them. It was Arkansas on the road in the SEC versus this team. Joe, what did we talk about? When this team doesn't turn the football over, they are dynamic in so many different areas. We've had this same conversation about Auburn. That's neither here nor there, but they still turn the ball over. What did we see from Arkansas? Well, they didn't turn the ball over, and defense played great. Offense did enough. They ran the football effectively, and they leaned on Tennessee. Joe, they were the more tested team, and it benefited them because when they went down 14-3, Taylon Green leads them all the way down the field for a touchdown to get it within 4. Then they're able to steadily just put on pressure to Tennessee, who could not stop the running game in the second half to save their life, and they were able to prevail. Russell, 8 carries, 62 yards, a 252-pound running back going downhill.
By the way, wait, not to cut you off, that dude running made me so happy. I'm such a dork for big running backs. I can't explain it. That dude was a tank.
Well, wait till we talk about Ole Miss. They have a defensive tackle that has 4 rushing touchdowns on the year. I mean, J.J. Pegues.
But this man that you're talking about for Arkansas is design running back. Get him more carries, please. Get him more carries.
Somebody said he's the Arkansas SEC version of Jerome Bettis.
Dude, he's built like him.
I mean, he's built like him. Yeah. But to my point, look, Tennessee thought, and Joe, the question that you and I had specifically about Tennessee coming into the season was their secondary. And Joe, once they found a quarterback with an outright pulse that could throw the football, what happened? Joe Armstrong had 9 catches, 132 yards. He didn't get in the end zone, but he had 3 crucial catches on third down. So did Satania. And by the way, there was a throw by Taylon Green in the end zone that Satania dropped that should have been a touchdown. Joe, that secondary did not have a good game. I know that statistics won't show it. I get all of that, but it was Taylon Green, Bobby Bertrino, and Sam Pittman, the design of being physical, staying in the game, that won them the game. Joe, they kept Tennessee to 0 points in the first half. At halftime, the score was 3-0. 3-0.
You've kind of already opened this conversation, Blake. Can we talk about Sam Pittman right now? To talk about like his current situation, because you've kind of you've led into it a little bit.
Ask the question: did it save his job?
Did this save his job? Do you think that this saved his job?
Not yet.
Okay.
I got to be real with you. Here's a very hot take. And Tennessee fans, I started throwing this out to you last week. Joe, I'm not saying they're a fraud. Okay, I still think that their defense is a lot better than what anybody will give them. Joe, if they can't find a passing game and Nico can't hit the ball down the field, they're going to play tough for teams that can beat them. And so I look at them and say, not yet. If they're going into a bye week, and if they beat LSU, you're damn right his job saved. It's over because he'll get to 6 wins, and he's going to get to more. But, yeah, I mean, if he goes in the bye week, which is going to buy up a lot of publicity, and he goes and beats LSU in that big rivalry game, which is their biggest rival, the way that they believe it, if he wins that one, his job's saved.
Well, okay, so I push back on them needing to beat LSU. I think, and look, Sam Pittman's season has been incredibly seesawish. Like, the Oklahoma State loss was where we had declared him done. Like, we thought that he was cooked. That's an embarrassing way to lose when you're up as big as you were, an opponent that you're more skilled than. And that loss looks worse and worse every single week because Oklahoma State has been a burning mess. Like they have gotten progressively worse every single week. They can't figure out anything offensively. They're a mess. They got whooped by West Virginia yesterday. I think that if they finish the season and they're able to pull out wins against Mississippi State, they play Louisiana Tech, which should be a win, and if they knock off Missouri, I'm going to make the argument that I think that he saves his job. I don't think it's a guaranteed yes, but I think that he has created himself enough of a buffer that, one, he'll get to finish the season. That's the most important part about this. He is not like Billy Napier, who could get fired at any point this year if they get their administration crap figured out, which probably won't happen anytime soon. But I think that Pittman has the benefit of the doubt to get to the end of the year because he pulled this off. Because I think that the administration has the opportunity to find out if he could do this again. And the argument from Pittman and his agent is going to be, look, just give us some more time. Look what we're doing. We've got all these new guys in here. Bobby Petrino's working out really good as the offensive coordinator. The offense is finally hitting its stride. We just started a little bit slow.
Did that. I mean, Sam probably didn't. I mean, he needs good coordinators around. And if you don't, I mean, look, defensively, Joe, let's call it what it is. Coach T. Will and all of them. I mean, look, man, they're outperforming what they have talent-wise. I mean, their D-line is good, but they're outperforming. He needs good coordinators. He needs assistance. He needs money. He needs to go out there and get more players. But, Joe, I can't say that yet because, look, he's got LSU, Ole Miss, Texas. I mean, that's potentially 3 losses there. They're at 4 wins. They would have to beat Mississippi State, Missouri, and Louisiana Tech. I don't know. I mean,
it's a tough conversation because like 7-5 doesn't look great. I mean, that's not. Well, it's not a great record.
If he goes 7-5, they're keeping him.
Yeah, I'd believe that. I would
Jalen Green will come back. You have so many guys that can come back next year. Yeah, they'd keep him. Yeah, they're going to keep him with Bobby Petrino and company. But look, no, they're going into a bye week. They're going to get healthy. If they beat LSU, Joe, by the way, they're 5-2. I mean, I spare me. I don't think that this is going to happen, but they're going to be 5-2, potentially playing at Mississippi State, 6-2. They'll go into an Ole Miss game at home, potentially. If they, I mean, Joe, you're going to throw them in a contender type of situation. You will.
Okay, but I just
if they can be. Hold on. Think about this.
A lot would have to go right for this situation to happen. This is very, very optimistic.
Joe, they just beat the number 4 team in the country. You mean to tell me that they can't beat LSU at home? LSU always struggles at Arkansas. Always.
I think that I think it's possible, but I'm sorry, but I'm just not super quick to assume that the outcome of this game automatically means that they're heads above tennis, or not heads above. Sorry, it's not. I know that's not what we said. It's not what we said. I know that's not what we said. I misspoke. Sometimes performances like this are really good teams playing down to an opponent, and that opponent knows to take advantage of them.
Tennessee's a good team. There, I said it. Because again, I don't think Tennessee might not be a good team because of the sense, Joe, who have they played? Okay, and how have they looked in teams that played them? I talked about earlier a quarterback with a pulse throwing the football. Joe, Jackson Arnold got benched. He got benched in the middle of the game, and they had to bring in Hawkins. Like, who has remotely tested them?
But this is – I feel like the outcome of the thoughts on this game, and I think that this one is – I mean, frankly, it's a lot more toxic of a conversation than the Bama one, because this is the battle that we're having is Arkansas better than we thought that they were, and is Tennessee worse than we thought that they were? I think that Arkansas is scrappy. I think that Arkansas is good enough to knock off and upset somebody else because the way that they play, and if Taylor Green is more consistent, then yes, they can go on this trajectory that you're projecting here. They're not given a situation where they have to play Georgia the rest of the year. They don't have to go up against Alabama. I don't believe they're not on their schedule. So they're afforded winnable SEC games. They still get to play Mississippi State and all that. Tennessee is also recoverable, though. Like, we need to admit here that Tennessee's situation, they played poorly yesterday. They played down to an opponent. They did not connect on any deep shots.
Did they play down to an opponent against Oklahoma who didn't have a pulse on offense? I mean, Joe,
they were kicking the crap out of Oklahoma until they brought in a backup quarterback that they were not prepared for, and Oklahoma scrapped their way back into the game because of that.
They weren't kicking the crap out of them because here's the thing. You had a team that barely could get past the 50-yard line, and you could barely get above 25 points. Here's the truth that Nico is not playing up to the standard that he needs to play up to, or what everybody thought that he'd play up to, and you know that. And until he does, Joe, they have an issue at moments and times moving the football.
Wait, hold on. I don't want to jump to the conclusion that Nico is the reason for their offensive issues. Like, I don't think that that's the case. I think that the play calling was...
He went 1 of 9 on third down throwing the football. What are you talking about?
I think that a lot more of it was with the play calling and the passing decisions that were made by Heupel, and then the late game decision making that did not set him up for success.
Now do Oklahoma. The 3 Power 4 teams that he's played, Joe, he's below 60% completion percentage, and he has not looked good enough.
He's a redshirt freshman. He's a redshirt freshman. So first of all, we need to act like that he's...
I'm not saying pull him, but you got to come to a correlation of that when a player is playing bad, especially a quarterback, it affects the team. We know what he did against NC. Hold on, please let me finish. Again, you know what he did against NC State with 2 interceptions. You know how he looked and struggled with 2 turnovers against Oklahoma. And then, Joe, now you're turning into the 3rd Power 4 team that he's played. Again, I think he's going to be special, but you got to look at him at the right now. Is he going to be special? Yes. We all pretty much know that. But what we do know at the current moment, what life has given us in 3 Power 4 games, he has not been up to par. And you know that.
The problem and the reason why I don't like having this type of conversation is because, and Connor Weidman, who we're going to talk about in a little bit, is the perfect example of this. It's the perfect example of this. Guys have the ability, especially young football players who haven't played that much, have the ability to take huge steps forward. Taylon Green is the perfect example of this. He was the first 4 games of the season was in an offense that he was not used to, and he was making a bunch of silly mistakes, errant passes, bad throws, and he played lights out against a great Tennessee secondary. He outplayed that great secondary that has a ton of talent within it and a great defensive line.
He can progress.
I'm not saying that you don't believe that he can't progress, but when you have a young quarterback like this, the issue is with Heupel. Heupel needs to know how to set him up better to succeed. Early on in the season, he was setting him up better. It feels like that has not been the case, and was not the case against Arkansas, was not the case in the second half against Oklahoma.
Like, you mean setting him up like when Squirrel White was wide open and he missed him for a touchdown? You mean like that one? I mean, Joe,
I'm not going to act like that wasn't a bad throw. Yes, that was a bad throw.
But it didn't happen just once. And again, you have the statistic that's out there that he's 1 for 9 passing on third down. Also, look at the end of the game. That's a decision by him. Joe,
no. Hold on. The late game clock management, him rolling out and yes, running out of bounds was a huge lack of experience mistake. But the clock management that Heupel set him up with completely screwed him.
Well, I'm not going to blame that all on Heupel, because Heupel was screaming his ass off about snapping the football, and they weren't doing it, and he
should have called a timeout.
He did call a timeout.
But he did it with like 17 seconds left, didn't he? He did it with no time left on the clock. Again, he is a redshirt freshman quarterback.
Yes.
I don't understand why.
And I'm not coming down on him.
I know you're not.
But as a team, until he progresses and show that he can be better in crucial situations, it affects the team.
Okay, but all I'm trying to state here in my whole argument is I don't disagree. I think that he does need to improve. He does need to be more precise in those situations. But at the end of the day, and this is a problem where young quarterbacks get doomed all the time. It's happening with Anthony Richardson that I yell about. It happened with Bryce Young in the NFL. It happened with Kyle McCord last year with Ohio State. The list could go on and on with young quarterbacks.
All of those teams have in common?
They all expect too much. No, but they all expect too much out of young quarterbacks when they need to be set up to better succeed.
Like what?
Blake.
Like, I'm just asking, like, how do you want him to be set up to succeed?
The decision-making, the play calling on third down, I don't remember the exact plays that they had on those third down situations, but if you're 1 for 9, you can't keep coming back to the same stuff. Something is clearly not working. And they ran the ball well.
The only thing I'd get on hype about, which I agree with you, why did you get away from Dylan Sampson?
So if I'm remembering this correctly, they had the lead, and when they punted, and this was part of the reason what I'm coming back to. Dylan Sampson was playing really well. He was over 139 yards. And there was one instance where they threw the ball on that drive when they really shouldn't. They should have ran the ball every single play until they were forced to punt.
I agree with that. I agree.
That plays into what I'm talking about here. Is like, why are you
thinking way too much? I think the system is too
simplify it.
Simplify it. Way too complicated for him. All right. Okay. You want to move on to A&M and Mizzou?
Yeah, let's do it.
All right. Joe, A&M versus Missouri this past weekend in College Station. It was the game that you and I disagreed on our game picks. Put your boy back in the lead. But how did you see this game? It was, man, A&M put it on that ass. I'm sorry, but how did you see that game?
All right, well, so since you're taking the victory lap on you getting that pick correctly, I'm very quickly taking the victory lap for bringing up that Missouri could be on fraud watch, because you know what? They were, and the fraud watch came to fruition. They were fraudulent. I'm sorry, Missouri fans. Your offensive line is not good enough to compete with the difficult games on your schedule. Easy schedule or not for the rest of the season. You are not physical enough up front to defend top defenses in the SEC. And if you go to the playoff, I'm picking against you. I'm picking you to lose no matter who you go up against in the playoff, because you got bodied. Texas A&M didn't do anything exotic with their defensive line. You know what they did the whole game? And I want to watch the all 22 of this, which I'm planning to do this week. They just dropped into coverage and rushed 4 or 5. Nothing special. You couldn't block at all. I tweeted this during the game. It was so quickly that the pockets were collapsing for Missouri on a snap-to-snap basis. And the worst part about all this, you completely gave up on running the football. I don't know how many times I need to yell about this on this show. Teams need to stop giving up on running the football just because they go down 2 scores. For the love of God, please.
They couldn't run the ball. And that was the issue.
But it was so early. At some point, though, and I understand that, yeah, that's an issue. And I know that it's not as black and white as like, well, if you're having trouble running the ball, just keep trying and it'll work eventually. Be creative. If certain things aren't working, if you can't run between the tackles, get to the outside. Use pitches. Brady Cook's a good athlete. Why aren't they trying to incorporate him more into the running game? It just felt so hapless the way that Missouri played here. And I got to give Texas A&M credit. Elko's a great coach. And I have always been praising him on this show. And this is a more example of what this team could be in the near future.
Well, look, it's pretty simple for me. Both lines of scrimmage, the offensive line for A&M and the defensive line for Texas A&M, dominated from start to finish. Look, Le'Veon Moss had 12 carries, 138 yards, mainly due to the fact that O-line they picked up a paddle and started smacking them cheeks, man. I mean, it was a display of great offensive play. Look, everybody talked about Connor Weigman, and they should. I thought he had a really good game. But, Joe, it's not like he did something absolutely special. He went 18 of 22. He was very accurate, but he had 276 yards. His wide receivers, Noah Thomas and company, made outstandingly ridiculous plays on the Missouri DBs. The bottom line is that this is a physical, tough football team. They are going to line up. They are going to punch you in the mouth. And if you don't like it, they don't care. They are going to go with multiple backs. They're going to run right at you, and there's nothing you can do to stop it. The simple nature is that Missouri does not have the dudes up front. And that is very apparent when you look at them. Not compared to A&M. Joe, your boy, Nick Scourton, finally made an appearance. Multiple tackles for loss in the running game. Had a sack. Was phenomenal in everything that he did, so much so that it got one-on-one opportunities for the rest of the D-line. By the way, you need help on the Shamar twins. So the bottom line is that A&M, for as much as people want to clown them about the all that stuff with the cheer squad and all of that, it doesn't matter, because on the field, if you're not ready to buckle up your chin strap and get ready to go, they're going to knock you out. And yesterday was worse than the score indicated to me. The 41-10.
Absolutely.
It was much worse. Now, What Missouri fans are going to come in here and say was, well, what about the Luther Burden reverse touchdown? What about the PI that was picked up? That has nothing to do with allowing 236 rushing yards on you. Nothing.
Well, my counter argument to that is you giving up because those calls got reversed tells me everything about your team. That's where the problem is in this game. Is there was just a general lack of energy and then a general lack of focus, it felt like, from Missouri. When penalties happen, plays get called back. It's how you respond. It felt like they gave up really quickly, and everything you just said about Texas A&M, I think was truly spot on. And this is why anyone who was critical of the Elko hire, I know it's too soon to classify this as a perfect hire and he's going to go on to win a national championship. That's not what I'm saying. The early dividends are showing that the improvement on a week-to-week basis,
they're getting better every week, no doubt.
Yeah, how good they can be on defense to play as simply as they did and to dominate the way that they did. I think really sums things up.
Very quickly. They were in too high. They had 5-6 guys in the box, and they could not run the football. Joe, I mean, bottom line is
domination.
That it was a complete domination. And listen, I want to say this. Earlier in the season, when me and you previewed Texas A&M, we talked about their wide receiver core, and the multiple fans from other SEC fan bases came after me, talking about Blake doesn't know what he's talking about with Noah Thomas. Do I know now? Do I know? I mean, like,
played his ass off.
What about now? Because it's not that he just played his ass off. Joe, he's out. Joe, did you know on the stat sheet that he got 3 pancakes? Do you know that they
did he really?
Yes.
That's awesome. I love that.
But it teaches about a mentality that Elko brings. Gonna be real with you. You should know this better than most. Who are 2 coaches that got the biggest upsets, arguably, this past week? What tree did they come off of? That Notre Dame tough tree, right? Like they did. Clark Lee.
Yeah, that is actually crazy that the Brian Kelly Notre Dame.
Well, I wasn't even really talking about Brian Kelly, but you can throw it in there. That's true. But what is the style of play that they come from? Tough defensively. We're going to run the football and punch you in the shit. They're replicating what the guy that they were below, that was right above them, they are replicating everything that he did. And this is what happens when you recruit on both lines of scrimmage and you dominate. So I know you're bringing up a point, but I just had to get that in there.
No, I mean, you hit the nail on the head, but I wanted to bring up Weigman really quickly. And this isn't, when I say this, I'm not circling back on the Nico take. This is a completely separate take. Connor Weigman's a perfect example just for everybody out there that was so quick to write him off. And apparently I didn't see the quotes, but Elko was very aggressive in making these similar statements. Just because a young kid who hasn't played a lot of games, has one bad game, does not mean that they can't bounce back and get better. And he played phenomenally. He played and looked like the first-round potential prospect that he is. I think he needs to stay next year, and he needs one more year of college ball before he makes that jump. But as much as we were praising Marcel Reed, Colin Klein definitely deserves a lot of credit. People were ready to out him after the Notre Dame game.
He made the right decision.
A lot of right decisions, a lot of great play calling in this game. I'm sure Marcel Reed's probably going to get an opportunity to play and start somewhere else after he put all that great tape on film. But Weigman, man,
I'm sorry.
To finish what I'm saying with Weigman, if he continues to get better next season, I think he could be a top 3 quarterback in the SEC if that's the type of stuff that he puts out there on the field.
I want to say this. I get what you're saying. However, there's not a team that A&M is faced outside of, I know the Bowling Green thing, I'm not going there. But there hasn't been a team outside of Notre Dame that can match the physicality of A&M. Like, they haven't played the big boys that they will play. And play calling is very easy when you can line up, if you're Colin Klein, and run the football with your lead back who's going to go over 10 yards a carry, going to go at 12 yards a carry. So I get what you're saying. They got a long season to go. But Weigman was very efficient. He had something to the touchdowns mean nothing. Like, him not having a touchdown means nothing to me because of man,
anyone who brings it up didn't watch the game, because the throws that he was making and the tight windows and setting up his guys for those contested catches, the no touchdown thing means nothing to me.
Means nothing. All right. You want to go to Miami and Cal?
Oh, yes, this is going to be fun.
All right. Joe, in back-to-back weeks, the U has been on upset alert. Now, this past week, obviously, they were able to save themselves on a touchdown reverse call against Virginia Tech. But this week versus Cal, game day is on the scene in Berkeley. They go down 35-10. They come back. They win it 39-38. How did you see this game play out?
First of all, quick shout out to Michael Irvin. I think he needs to be on the sideline for every single game.
No.
Hire him. Come on.
The dude was sitting in doggy style. No.
The energy that he brings to the sideline,
pop blocking, dropping it. No.
Come on, no. There isn't a single other former player of another team that has the energy that man brings to the sideline. And what do you? I was enamored. I didn't know that he came to this game until they started showing him. But last week there was that one screenshot where he's yelling at the Miami players and getting them all riled up. So just a quick shout out to Michael Irvin. He's awesome. Man, I know what to make of Miami. I'm not going to come in here and say I don't know what to make of them. They are one of the most chaotic, ridiculous teams that I have ever watched. And before, as I elaborate here, before anyone wants to say that like I'm overly defending them, I've got some sort of bias. I was very critical of Mario Cristobal last year. I was very critical of Miami last year. I am not a Miami fan. If anything, I am the complete opposite. But one, we have to acknowledge,
you're the Catholic, not the convict.
Right. I'm a Notre Dame fan. So like I've got no reason. My dad does not like Miami. So like was raised that way. But to talk about this Miami team, they are on a trajectory, I think, to finish the season out with, make it a special year. I'm not saying that they win a national championship, but I think that they are good enough to be on this trajectory to win an ACC championship game. I keep bringing this up. I keep tweeting it. There's always one team every single season. And like last year, it was Florida State. The year before that, it was TCU. Or actually last year, Washington's the better example, not Florida State. That is just so unbelievably lucky. And every time that you think they're about to lose, something falls in their favor and they find a way to win. I got to give them credit, and everything just seems to be on their side. And the reason why I say that Miami is extremely chaotic, Blake, I can't think of another team that makes more insane mistakes, false starts, illegal motions,
9 penalties, 110 yards.
But these penalties came on third downs and fourth downs in crucial game-changing situations, and they still managed to find ways to convert in those situations. Here's the fruition of the take I'm trying to get to, Blake. I can't imagine how good this Miami team would be if they didn't do all this dumb crap that they did. The turnovers on top of it, on top of the penalties, the pick sixes that Cam Ward sets his team up for, and those bad throws that he has. If they played 70% cleaner, they'd be blowing everybody out. Virginia Tech wouldn't be close. The Cal game wouldn't be close. If they are able to, in the final stretch of the season, in the final second half of the year, clean up 60-70% of these issues, I think that they can be one of the best teams in the country. But right now, they're making a ton of mistakes, and it eventually very well could catch up to them, and they're going to lose a game that they're not supposed to.
1 time's an accident, 2 times is a habit. Right? I mean, that's the whole football season. One time is an accident, 2 times the standard. Or what my grandfather used to say, it's a habit, okay? Joe, they're allowing too many explosive plays defensively. For as much as people make for them defensively with Reuben Bain and the boys and all of them, Joe, think about this. They gave up a touchdown on 4th and 1 on a play action that and Ott, the running back, caught a pass out of and was able to run into the end zone. They gave up a big post. The second touchdown that they had by the tight end was a big play. Cal scored because they gave up explosive plays. They're making mental mistakes. They're not locked in, which either tells me, number one, the players don't understand what's going on. Number two, they're poorly coached. Or number three, they even after last week, they still don't give a damn. And so it can either be one of those three. It's not as if that Cal came in and did something interesting. Joe, on a 4th down that went for 7, they ran Spider 2 Y banana, hashtag John Gruden. That's how they scored. By the way, it went for 70. So when I look at Miami versus Cal, Cal, like, they didn't do anything special. But think about this. Mendoza, the quarterback, 11 completions, 285 yards. By the way, he was 50% passing. So other times we know that they did really good. It was the boneheaded mistakes, as you are alluding to here, the boneheaded mistakes that while Cal was in this game anyway. But I get your point in the sense of that they're toying with their food to some extent. Joe, they came back down from 35-10 when the explosive plays went away.
You have to be a good football team to do that, by the way. Like that needs to be recognized.
You also have to be an undisciplined, unruly football team to be down 35-10.
I know. This is why they're incredibly chaotic. It's ridiculous.
Joe, they only gave up 3 points with 8 minutes left to go in the third quarter. So for 8 plus 15, so was it 22 minutes? 22 minutes. They didn't allow a point. By the way, Cal only passed the 50 once. So they have the ability to do what they need to do when they're serious. I don't think Joe, they're the most Miami team of all time. Can I tell you why?
Why?
Miami people don't show up until it's too late. That's why the clubs stay open until 4 and 5 in the morning, because people want to show up late.
I saw somebody tweeted because this game was nicknamed Woke versus Coke, and I saw somebody tweeted, "Why wouldn't you expect Coke to show up at 2 a.m.?"
Well, let me ask you this question, because I know that this is going to be the question, a part of this, because Cal fans are pissed off right now, and I need to talk about Cal. Joe, was that a good overturn of the targeting?
So first of all, that call is not the sole impact of the game. You still let Miami get back into the game with the amount of points that you were up by. Second of all, it looked like targeting, and it could have been called targeting. And I'm not trying to come to their defense or anything. But the situation that happens is that they didn't call targeting on the field, and then they decided to review it. It's not like they called targeting and then went to review it. Officiating, the order of operations is supposed to be that you need evidence to prove in order to change the call. Like, you need evidence. It was too close for them to do that. You can't hinge a game-changing decision on somebody phoning in and saying that we need to, I would assume that's how it happened, saying that they needed to take a look at it. If it wasn't called on the field, you can't make the decision after the fact and then turn that into a targeting call. That's just the way that that it seemed like to me. If it was called on the field, I think the outcome would have been completely different, if that makes sense. I'm sure some people are going to say it doesn't.
Look, I got to be real with you, bud. And I know that people are going to hold this against us in me saying this, and I apologize. I don't know what targeting is.
Well, because I mean, that's kind of my whole part of this is that there's no clear definition, and he's like, he hit him with his shoulder, but he led with his head. So it's like, what the hell are we?
I don't know what targeting is.
It needs to get removed from the rule book. It's a terrible rule.
Oh, hold on. I don't think it needs to be removed from the rule book. What I think needs to happen is first offensive targeting, maybe a 15-yard penalty. I think you got to go to you can't kick players out. You can't kick college players out. You just can't. Because they're still learning and developing. You want to do that in the NFL? Have at it.
They don't even have that rule in the NFL.
They don't even have that rule in the NFL. I thought he was going for his hip. I really did. I think the dude's trying to make a play in crunch time. And I don't believe that there was any intention that he was trying to target. But there comes a part, if you're a Cal fan, like, hey man, there's no real standard from game to game on what targeting is. It's what baseball really does too. Like, you don't know what a ball or a strike is, depending on whatever strike zone that you have by either umpire. But I just don't know what it is. But I'm gonna disagree with you. I thought it was targeting. I mean, by the rule of what I've seen people be called for, he led with the crown of his helmet. Joe, it's just that's rule number one. So look. I got to disagree, because every time that I've seen targeting called, it looks like that, right? Now, that's back-to-back times where calls go in Miami's favor, and here's one thing that I will mention. Okay. Luck is a big deal when you win a national championship or you get to a playoff. So I still think it was targeting. That's just how I see it.
Just a final thought on this.
Yep.
we spent time in the preview, and I don't think that anyone should diminish this. The situation that Miami has going into that game, for them to start out flat doesn't surprise me. And for them to win it, they deserve respect. And I already see a couple people in the chat saying that, like they haven't played anybody. Cal's not that good. They were one of the most productive teams in turning opposing quarterbacks over and picking up the football.
Cal went into the SEC and beat the team that Georgia just did.
Yes. And on top of this, they had to fly across the country. I know they left on Thursday and they were all flying first class, but they had to go across the country and the game kicked off at 10:30 for their body clock. Okay, that is a difficult circumstance. It's hard. Anyone who's played a college sport
and then
knows.
When 2 a.m. rolled around their time, then that's when they started kicking into gear. The
Look,
cocaine rush, maybe.
All I'm saying is, for all of I'm not saying it was like a hugely adverse, difficult situation, but it's a tough spot to win in. It's a tough spot to win, and they deserve credit for some of the outcomes.
All I'm going to say is, Joe, I because of how Clemson plays and how Miami plays. Joe, is Clemson the best team in the ACC?
I think it's close.
I think it's much closer than 3 weeks ago, is it not?
No, it is.
Right.
It definitely is.
All right. Let's start wrapping this thing up. So, Joe, there were some other upsets in the top 25 this past weekend. Let's start off with Michigan. Michigan loses to Washington. Your thoughts? And hold on one second. I see the super chats. We're going to get to them at the end of the show. I promise we're getting to all of them. I'm just holding them all. Your thoughts on Michigan losing to Washington?
Yeah, man. I think that what we said in the preseason about this Michigan team has come to fruition pretty quickly. They weren't going to be in a national championship capacity. They just weren't. For everything that happened during the offseason, we talked about this a little bit after the Texas game, for all the guys that they lost and for them being so delayed in the process of rebuilding and all of these things, they weren't going to be back there. And after they beat USC, I didn't think that things were suddenly fixed. I think that they just beat a team that they overmatched and were more physical than. And if you want to hear our thoughts on the game, go listen back to it. I don't think Michigan should be ranked, and I don't think that Michigan is one of the top teams in the Big Ten right now. I think that Indiana has a legitimate shot to beat them. I truly do. I think Michigan in the future is going to be fine by next season. I am a very big fan of Sharon Moore, and I think he's going to get that team right.
They're losing a lot of people on defense, man.
The quarterback play is what it all comes down to, and there's no hot take there. I mean, they've gone to 3 different guys. They can't make a decision, and nobody is the right answer. It is a mess. I stand by that. I think that Michigan is more middle of the pack than they've ever been.
Look. I don't want to take away from Washington, though, because Washington is 4-1, 5-1 on the season. I don't want to take from Jeff Fish, who, by the way, Joe, literally look what he did at Arizona last year. I mean, we're going to forget that he's a good coach and they're a good staff and they have some players that still are there. I mean, I get it's Michigan. Washington still has a lot of the same pieces that did not go with Kalen DeBoer. Yeah, they did. Their entire offensive line, or 3 of the 4 offensive linemen on the at center, guards, and the right tackle were on the team. They didn't have to go in the portal and get those guys as starters.
There were backups, though. Parker's Brailsford was starting center at Washington, and both the tackles went on to the NFL. No, come on. That Washington team is completely picked apart. That Washington team is
what I'm saying is that you still had a lot of kids that had been there.
Okay.
I mean, that's
all right. But move past that point. I just don't know if I agree with that. What were you saying?
Well, they literally did, but it doesn't matter. All I'm going to say is that, look, Washington has been moderately good team. Now, Michigan's just not a good football team. They have no business. You're right. They have no business being ranked. Zero business. I mean, why not put Washington ahead of them? That's literally the team that they just beat them.
Well, and especially now that USC is not ranked in the AP poll and that we kind of very quickly learned.
Well, hold on. Pause. Do you know the guys that vote in the AP poll?
I understand that, but I actually don't disagree with that logic to completely remove them.
No, I don't either. I don't either.
They have two losses.
Michigan at 24.
I know that's a mistake. Washington should be ranked, and Michigan and USC should not be ranked. That's what should happen.
Bro, I know like 25 of those people personally that vote in the AP poll, and I think that they're all idiots. Most of them, not all of them, like half of them. Half of them are blatant idiots.
I don't disagree with that.
So, look, Michigan's on more of a rebuild. They don't have a quarterback, man. They don't. No,
they. I mean, we mentioned Marcel Reed earlier. I mean, they should go and get Marcel Reed. I think he'd play great in that offense and that scheme that they run. They need somebody who has
leaving. I mean, well, let me back up.
He's not starting over Connor Weigman anytime soon.
Well, if Portnoy is going to pay the money that he says he is, which I think he's all, I'm going to leave that alone.
Okay.
I still believe that they're going to go get a quarterback. But you have a lot of those defensive pieces that won't be there either. And Joe, they're not recruiting the way that Harbaugh did either. It's not like they're replenishing the way that they did.
They're very slow to get going, and there's still plenty of time for them to.
Joe, they're still on. They still, the hammer still hadn't come down. I mean,
that is true.
This is going to get worse before it gets better. I mean, because if you're a quarterback of a team and you're a high-profile kid, even though you're making money, if you have no chance for a postseason, are you going to go there?
That's very true, and it's probably getting worked against them in recruiting right now. It's probably getting brought up.
It is.
Yeah.
I'll say this. I think they're going to throw the money in the high school direction and start getting better there instead of the development part of what Harbaugh was trying to do. All right. Joe, USC goes down against Minnesota. Lincoln Riley is 5-7 in his last 12 football games.
Very different conversation than what we're having with Michigan because, most importantly, Lincoln Riley's in year 3. I'm mad at myself, man. This is Tyler Van Dyke all over again last year. I let myself get swayed too easily by the conversations of a particular fan base. Dude, Lincoln Riley's got to prove something to me, man. They looked more physical, and I think that their defense has improved vastly because of D'Anton Lynn, but they do not bring the level of physicality, especially on offense, necessary to compete in the Big Ten. That to me is what it really comes down to. And I think that what epitomized and paints this picture of what we're discussing with that lack of physicality is the 4th down and inches on the goal line where Max Brosmer surges his way in for the go-ahead touchdown. That paints the picture perfectly that they were not ready to play in the Big Ten and to match that level of just physical play. I don't know where USC goes from here, man. Like I think that they're perfectly beatable. I think that they could finish the year 9-3. They're not a playoff team. I have not been necessarily impressed over these past couple of games, and it feels like they're going backwards. That's always been an issue with Lincoln. I mean, that's like my whole thing with this is I feel like that there's no consistency ever with Lincoln Riley. They can't just be steady. It's always up or down.
In 3 years, he had 3 playoffs. He made it 3 playoffs. I can't say there's never been consistency with him.
That's not what I'm talking about in his time at USC. Like he hasn't been consistent at USC.
The rebuild is different. I think the rebuild's completely different. And listen, it's going to take him some time on defense. That's just the bottom line.
Yeah, but you keep rebuilding in year 3, though. That's what's like so problematic about this conversation.
I get it. But I mean, Joe, he's complaining about their NIL situation. He's complaining about their facilities, and he's been open. And I think it's
then why did he take the job?
Well, because you know why he took the job. But I mean, he got paid a shitload of money to go there. But it was a dumb decision in some aspects. But he's still 5-7. I mean, we've seen coaches have really bad years and bounce back and be able to ride the ship.
Wait, hold on. I don't mean to cut you off, but that has said so much for Lincoln Riley. How many times are people in the media going to keep saying this for Lincoln Riley? Oh, well, we've seen coaches bounce back. It gets brought up so.
Name the person who's doing it.
Well, Colin Cowherd's a big glazer.
Well, I mean, that's okay. So he's really good friends with him. So I don't think that anybody that actually took college football is doing that. I mean, he's 5-7.
I think naturally he gets the benefit of the doubt. Because he was so good at Oklahoma.
Because he's got 3 playoffs underneath his belt, and you can't take that away from him. Multiple Heisman Trophy winners, you can't take that away from him. Joe, they don't have depth on their offensive line or defensive line anymore. Bear Alexander leaves. But Darius Taylor last night went for 144 yards. I mean, Joe, they got popped in the mouth. And Miller Moss, his O-line, I mean, really put him in some very bad situations. He's kind of seeing ghosts a little bit because he's getting beat up every week, and he throws 2 interceptions. But the bottom line is that they got to recruit on the line of scrimmage for them to ever get back to anywhere that they were. They're playing powder puff football. Now, at the end position, it's not that they have bad starters, Joe. They have some pretty good starters defensively. Yeah. They just don't have the rotational pieces to give those guys a break, and it's been hurting them.
But so part of the problem with, they need to rebuild on their lines of scrimmage, but O-line, D-line play, you're very rarely going to find freshmen who are ready to play immediately. True. So it's not this isn't something that gets fixed until 3 years from now, potentially. We see the problem with trying to go into the portal and to resolve those issues through portal additions because, there's a lack of chemistry with teammates and just an understanding of team culture and all those things. I don't know. I think that this situation for Lincoln could just only get worse. I don't see where it suddenly gets better.
We'll have to see, but it does look in a dire situation that things could get much worse. Joe, we got a lot of people in the chat asking us to talk about Ohio State. Did you get eyeballs on that game?
Sure, let's talk about Ohio State. I didn't get a time. There was so much going on. I got to be completely honest.
We got 9 comments that I went through that all of them are wanting to talk about Ohio State.
Okay.
Do you want to get to it briefly?
Do you want to prioritize that over talking about Ole Miss?
No, I don't. But I mean,
yeah, we can talk a little bit about Ohio State. I just admittedly.
Okay. Well,
how much of this game did you watch? Okay. In all seriousness,
I watched the whole thing, but
okay,
we'll pass on him. All right, let's wrap it up with this and then get to super chats here.
Okay.
Joe, Ole Miss came off a really bad loss against Kentucky last week, but they go into Columbia, a really tough place to play, and are able to beat South Carolina. Listen, I'm going to say this. This is going to be my only thing about this game that I saw because this is actually just what happened all day long. Shane Beamer got out-coached. He got out-coached. He made some dumb decisions. Very, very dumb decisions. That's it. I mean, I look at them and say that they left so much on the table, and I feel like he has a big part in doing that. You're coming off a bye week, and you draw an egg on offense. Cut me a break, man. Cut me a break.
Yeah, it was pretty vanilla play calling. Couldn't get anything going in the passing game. My statements about the offensive line were 1,000% correct, by the way, because they got worked. Ivy and Nolan both had 2 sacks.
Joe, what? Actually,
and they were without Uman Mielen as well. They didn't have Uman Mielen, and they still produced that.
Walter Nolan, J.J. Pegues. J.J. Pegues has 4 touchdowns rushing on the season. So that D-line, that D-line is pretty legit, dude.
Well, this is what's the stark difference is that, and it's another example of how things can change on a week-to-week basis, is that this Ole Miss team has more life than we would have expected because of how they played against Kentucky. And if it wasn't for the Kentucky game, I think we could be arguing right now that Ole Miss is one of the top teams in the SEC if it wasn't for that terrible Kentucky performance, but shoulda, coulda, woulda, we're not going to play that game. I'm not going to be critical of Shane Beamer because South Carolina fans get really hot and bothered when I say negative things about your overrated coach, so I'm just not going to do it. I'm gonna give credit to Lane Kiffin though. I think that, and I said this coming into the game, that Lane Kiffin is the king of rallying his team when they play poorly the week prior. They have to, the rest of the season, Blake, they have to ride the run game. They have to stop doing what they did against Kentucky. If they have a single game where they just try to throw the ball over and over again, they're going to lose bad matchups that they're supposed to be much better than. If they play more balanced football, they will play as good as they did against South Carolina. They'll get the ball out quick. They'll pick up huge gains. They're good enough to finish 10-2. It all comes down to, does Lane Kiffin live up to the expectations and the hype, and does he overthink things like he did going into the Kentucky game?
Joe, I still think they have a problem running the football. I think something's off with their offense because, look, Jackson Dart went 2 of 8 in the second half. 2 of 8 for 51 yards.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, something's off. I don't know what it is. Now, here's what I'm starting to think. Those injuries that Lane Kiffin had been putting on the report, I think a lot of them are BS. I think he's trolling to some aspect. Joe, I think they're really beat up. I do. I mean, Trey Harris gets nicked up. Human Yelling gets nicked up. Look, their offensive line has been banged up. I think they've had some really bad injuries. The problem, look, they bounced back in a tough environment, and they did. But defensively, they've given up, 10 points the last 2 weeks combined? I mean, that's amazing against any conference opponent. Yeah. So defensively, they've been living up to the standard. It's, Joe, when is that offense going to get going? Is it going to be this week versus LSU? When is it going to get going? And it's just the last 2 weeks, man, you've had some really bad play offensively that if you don't correct this upcoming week, you're going to lose.
Absolutely. I really think, and when we do that preview tomorrow, their success is going to come down to, can they have a balanced offensive attack? And can that offensive line, that Ole Miss offensive line that's been really shaky, can they have a big game against a LSU defensive front that's been trying to figure out its own identity?
Look, man, they have a problem running the football. I'm going to be it. Look, they might come out against LSU and run it all over them. Okay, it'd be the most Ole Miss thing ever. But at the same time, you got to show that against a good opponent that you can run the football effectively. They didn't do that, in my opinion. I thought they underwhelmed me. Joe, they're having to put in a defensive tackle at the goal line. And everybody's like, oh, Juckins was a problem here. Juckins was a problem there. When a great player leaves in a room like that, it's always going to be an issue. So They got a big matchup this week. All right. Elks with a $2 super chat says, I bet Joe's going to have the Vols and Bama above Ohio State still in his power rankings.
I actually was considering dropping Ohio State. I think I was going to move them to 10. I think that's a fair place to put them. No, look, I understand the criticism I got from Elks for my power rankings last week. Ohio State's. I said this on the other show, the Hack City. That's just general football talk that I do with. We do pro and college with my friend Sean. I might actually put Ohio State 1 because right now the Texas win over Michigan is far less impressive than we thought it was. The Iowa win, in all seriousness, I was watching this game. It was in the quad box, and I just wasn't tracking it closely. But the way that you played against Iowa, a team that their only loss coming into the game was against a ranked, undefeated Iowa State team that could very well win the Big 12 and probably will win the Big 12. That's far more impressive than Texas beating Michigan. I know that's a lot of math going on there, but I think Ohio State might be my number 1 in the power rankings this week. You not ready to go there? You going to put Texas 1?
No, I don't know that. But what I'm going to say is that one played a moderately, slightly better opponent than the other.
I know but this is why it's so annoying. And I there was my whole stance yesterday is that there's no clear answer at number 1. You can pick anybody. You can pick Oregon. Oregon's win over Boise State looks better every week.
No, it doesn't. Okay. You can't walk off in a field goal and be a top 5. Joe, they're the number 3 team in the country. I mean, for crying out loud. I mean, Come on. No way. Fravel edits with a $5 super chat says, great weekend of college football. Notre Dame is almost back in the top 10. And thank you, Texas A&M, for the resume booster. Miami is overrated and got helped by the refs twice.
Well, part of the problem with that, Fravel, is that right now the USC game at the end of the year is starting to look weaker. The Northern Illinois loss looks worse and worse potentially every single week because they're they came back against UMass and they won. I don't know. The Notre Dame resume is going to be weird, and Louisville losing also hurts them. So we're kind of just back at net zero.
Fravel also with a $10 super chat says, I'm so sick and tired of these talking heads still acting like Miami is an elite football team after needing luck against Cal and Virginia Tech. Louisville will smack them. Cam Ward having a quote-unquote Heisman moment versus Cal. Crying face emojis, dead emoji.
All right, that I disagree with. I mean, they were down by 25 points. Oh my God, what?
Well,
you can't give me
again. You can make the argument they were down 25 points.
Well, but that's mostly directed at the Heisman comment. But
he had some Heisman moments.
Look, I think that
nobody got to see it.
There's a middle ground here. that no one wants to find. It's either they stink and they're overrated, or they're the best team, one of the best teams in the country. There's a middle ground, and we need to be
fans
careful.
Don't like teams like Miami that they're not fans of, so they're going to say that they stink.
Yeah,
and it seems like Fravel's a Notre Dame fan. Elks with a $2 super chat says, "Can we talk about Malachi Moore acting like a baby?" Do you want to touch that?
I mean, but he needs to have better composure. It's a kid that you brought in the transfer portal. Maybe that's a sign of some of the issues that we talked about with the coaching, that some of these guys aren't locked in. Some of these guys aren't completely bought into the team culture. Because, I mean, that's unacceptable. It's funny to see, but it's unacceptable.
Well, let me go full span with this. Malachi Moore and Dylan Stewart. You saw the quote tweet by Jackson Dart. He quoted Dolph by saying 100 shots, how'd you still miss or whatever. That shit's not – I said this on AYS because one of our players did the same kind of gun thing and then got flagged for it, whatever. You're not a gangster. And look, people think I'm being like some kind of innuendo of who I am as a person from a political standpoint because I'm saying that. I'll show you some. Let me take you from – hold on. Let me take you from my old job, and I'll show you what that looks like. It's stupid. The gun thing, it's stupid.
Yeah, you got to be a better role model.
No, it's stupid.
Right. I'm agreeing with you.
There's a lack of respect that's being missed here. Okay, this shit didn't happen, but because we're giving them money and portal, and we're bowing down to them, revenue share, all of that I agree on. Now they're taking that shit onto the field. The opposite should be happening. You better be Joe. What's going to happen when players start getting fined? When there's revenue share and they get fined $20,000 because they're pointing a gun at a player.
I don't know if we're ever going to get to that point.
Why can't we?
I mean, it's just. We've had this conversation before. It's just I think it's just so. We would need to have a union first before
LSU. Like if it were me, LSU, my team, or Notre Dame, your team, is paying them to paying them as what will technically be an employee in most regards, because they got to get a W-2 or 1099 in this. So in a lot of respects, you're now a reflection of me when we're giving you the money. So you can get fined off of that.
Yeah, I mean, I don't disagree. I can't speak on the complexity of like what it would require. I'm not a contract law expert, so I just don't know.
I get it, but it is what it is.
Mm-hmm.
All right, last one. Fravel says Miami is the only team to make excuses for. If this was Alabama, Notre Dame, LSU, Georgia, Ohio State, everyone would have stuff to say. If you want to be a top 10 team, you should be held to a standard.
Well, I made excuses for Alabama in the beginning of the show. I made excuses for LSU, even though that a lot of people think that they're overhyped. I've made excuses for them. I made excuses for Georgia last week.
Barely a top 15 team.
Well, there are some people out there that think they shouldn't be ranked. You'd be surprised. I don't look. I make excuses for good football teams.
Bama lost to Vandy.
Yeah, I make excuses for good football teams. Oh no, you're okay. All right.
I'm just saying.
Yeah. I know what you mean.
You want to say that Bama lost to Vandy. Notre Dame lost to Northern Illinois.
But that wasn't that's not what the argument is here.
No,
it's just, we're talking about Miami though.
Hold on. You're talking about a Rolex wearing. Woo! No, just kidding. You're talking about Notre Dame being ranked above LSU. I saw all of them all day. Notre Dame fans doing it. I had 4 tags on Twitter from Notre Dame fans. We're hiring you in the polls. All right, here's what I'd say. You lost to fucking Northern Illinois. What? One loss is not created to the equal. It's just not. Shut up.
Well, I mean, what evidence do we have that
you look like an idiot when you do shit like that? I'm just saying.
What evidence do we have that USC is better than Northern Illinois?
Joe, are you smoking crack?
All right, I'm just messing with you at this point.
No, you smoking crack like it's a Snowfall episode. All
right. Okay.
Big week 12. We'll talk about it tomorrow. We'll see y'all soon. Y'all have a good night, man. Peace.